You know what's fascinating? Truly intelligent people don't rush their minds. They don't jump to respond, react, or prove how smart they are. They pause, they observe, they think slowly, but once the picture is clear, they move with precision. It's not hesitation, it's calculation. That little silence before they answer a question isn't a void. It's the sound of gears turning, of neural pathways connecting, of judgment filtering emotion from logic. We live in a time where speed is worshipped, quick replies, fast money, instant decisions, but the truth is, fast doesn't always mean smart. The brain's prefrontal cortex, which governs logic and control, needs time to process before emotion takes over. That's why impulsive people often regret what they say or do. They act before their mind finishes loading the full picture. Smart people have learned to extend that gap between thought and reaction. That gap is where power lives. It's where clarity forms. Think about the last time someone said something that triggered you. An insult, a challenge, a judgment. Your body wanted to respond instantly, didn't it? That rush of adrenaline, the heat behind your words. But imagine if you took 3 slow breaths instead. You'd notice the anger dissolving, your thoughts reorganizing. You'd start to see options. Maybe you realize it's not worth responding at all. Maybe you realize there's a strategic way to reply that benefits you. That's what smart people do instinctively. They buy themselves time to think. This ability to think slowly but decide fast isn't just about emotional control. It's strategic intelligence. In business, for instance, those who take the time to study patterns, analyze behavior, and understand motives make fewer mistakes. They don't chase trends, they anticipate them. When the data aligns, they act decisively. No overthinking. No paralysis, just focused execution. It's like a chess player who studies the board quietly, letting everyone think he's stuck. Then, with one calm move, ends the game. That's not luck. That's restraint meeting timing. Intelligence isn't about how fast you speak, how loud you argue, or how many facts you can throw into a conversation. It's about awareness. It's about that quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need to prove their intelligence because they're too busy using it. If you pay attention, you'll notice this pattern everywhere, in leaders who listen more than they talk. In creators who spend hours refining one idea instead of chasing 10 new ones, in investors who wait for the right entry point instead of reacting to every market swing. Their patience looks like stillness, but it's not still, it's deliberate momentum. There's a subtle psychological power in that pause. When someone takes a moment before they respond, it communicates calm authority. The room gets quieter. People listen closer. It's as if that silence itself has weight, because deep down, everyone senses that when a smart person finally speaks, it means something. And it's not just about outward perception. That pause trains your mind. It rewires your nervous system to respond from clarity, not chaos. The more you practice it, the more composed you become under pressure. The world can shout, panic, rush, but your mind stays grounded, seeing through the noise. That's the edge. So maybe the next time someone pushes your buttons or life throws you a fast decision, remember this: intelligence isn't speed, it's rhythm. Think slow enough to understand, but act fast enough to matter. Smart people aren't in a hurry because they've mastered time, they control the moment between thought and action. And in that quiet space, that's where real intelligence lives. Curiosity is the engine of intelligence. The smartest people I've met aren't the ones with the most answers. They're the ones who never stop asking questions. But not just any questions. They ask why. Why do people behave the way they do? Why do systems work until they don't? Why do I believe what I believe? That single word, why, is what separates people who live on autopilot from people who actually understand the operating system of the world around them. Most people move through life collecting information like it's currency. They read, they listen, they memorize, but they rarely question the source, the context, or the reasoning behind it. It's like downloading 1,000 apps without ever checking if they're slowing the system down. Smart people, though, are curious engineers. They're not satisfied with knowing what something is. They want to know why it works, why it fails, why it matters. And that mindset, that constant interrogation of the world, is what allows them to adapt faster than everyone else. There's an interesting psychological link between curiosity and intelligence. When you ask why, your brain enters what researchers call an open loop, a state of mental tension that only resolves when you find the answer. That tension drives exploration. It forces your neurons to fire in patterns that connect ideas that normally wouldn't touch. It's the mental version of evolution, constant adaptation through inquiry. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine two people trying to make money online. One just copies what others are doing. They watch a few tutorials, mimic the trends, and hope for success. The other person pauses and asks, why do people buy this? Why is this ad working? Why is this message connecting? The first person is chasing, the second is understanding. And understanding always outlasts imitation. That's the quiet power of why. It shifts your mind from consumer to creator. It transforms you from a follower of patterns into a designer of them when you question the why. Behind things, not cynically, but curiously, you start to see the world as a series of systems that can be studied, improved, or reimagined. You stop reacting and start engineering outcomes, but asking why also requires humility, because to ask a genuine question, you have to admit that you don't already know. That's uncomfortable for most people. We've been trained to appear confident, to have opinions ready, to speak first. But true confidence comes from the willingness to explore uncertainty, to say, I don't know yet. That pause between ignorance and discovery is where real learning happens. I've seen this in scientists, in entrepreneurs, in artists. The people who shape the future don't start with certainty, they start with curiosity. They don't chase approval, they chase truth. They question why people think a certain way, why emotions drive behavior, why habits form, why failure repeats. And every time they ask, they learn something that others overlook. Here's what's even more interesting. When you train your brain to ask why, you begin to notice your own patterns. You start catching yourself in the act of repeating behaviors that don't serve you. You ask, why am I reacting like this? Why am I procrastinating? Why do I keep avoiding this decision? Suddenly, your curiosity turns inward, and that's where growth accelerates, when your questions stop being about the world and start being about yourself. See, intelligence isn't about how much you know, it's about how deeply you understand, and understanding always begins with curiosity. The smartest minds keep peeling back layers until they reach the core truth. They don't stop at surface explanations because they know that what tells you facts, but why gives you insight. So if you want to think like the smartest people on the planet, start living in a state of continuous questioning. Don't just accept what's popular. Don't just repeat what's taught. Ask why it's true, why it matters, why it works. Because the moment you start asking why, you stop being a spectator and become a participant in your own evolution. And that simple, relentless curiosity is how smart people stay ahead of everyone else. You can tell a lot about a person not by what they say, but by what they notice when they're quiet. Smart people have this almost invisible skill. They observe more than they talk. In a world obsessed with being heard, they've mastered the art of listening, of watching, of reading between the lines. That silence isn't passivity, it's strategy. It's how they gather the raw data that everyone else misses while they're too busy trying to sound intelligent. There's something incredibly powerful about being the quiet one in a loud room. When you speak less, you give your brain time to process more. You pick up micro-expressions, tone shifts, inconsistencies in stories. You start to see not just what people are saying, but what they're actually communicating. The brain's mirror neurons, the ones responsible for empathy and understanding, activate when you pay close attention. So while most people are preparing their next reply, the observer is downloading patterns, understanding motives, predicting outcomes. It's funny because we live in a culture that celebrates the loud and the confident. Everyone wants to have the last word, to dominate the room. But the ones who actually win the room are usually silent at first. They're scanning, they're measuring energy, hierarchy, dynamics. They know that the more information they collect, the more leverage they'll have when they finally do speak. And when they speak, people listen because silence builds authority. There's a deep psychology behind this. The human mind values scarcity. When words are rare, they feel more valuable. That's why when a person who usually stays quiet finally says something, everyone pays attention. Their speech carries weight because it's backed by restraint. It's like the difference between someone who throws every dart they have versus the one who waits for the perfect shot. The latter always hits harder, but observation isn't just about watching others. It's about awareness of space, timing, emotion, and energy. Smart people notice how a conversation feels, not just what it's about. They pick up on tension, enthusiasm, disinterest. They notice how someone's eyes flicker when they lie, or how their shoulders drop when they feel safe. They see what others filter out, and that gives them an edge in negotiations, relationships, creativity, everything. If you want proof of how powerful observation is, think about this. The best detectives, therapists, and entrepreneurs share the same habit. They listen longer than they speak. They let silence do the heavy lifting, because silence invites truth. When you stop filling every gap with noise, other people start revealing themselves. They explain more, they confess more, they show who they are, and all you had to do was wait. This kind of awareness also transforms how you learn. When you stop needing to perform intelligence, you create space to absorb it. You learn faster because your mind isn't defending an ego, it's expanding a map. Observation turns your attention into a microscope. The more you focus it, the deeper you see, and it's not about being introverted or shy. It's about being intentional. The smartest people aren't quiet because they're afraid. They're quiet because they understand timing. They know that you don't have to fill every silence. You don't have to react to every comment. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is pause, observe, and let the room reveal itself to you. Try this the next time you're in a group discussion. Instead of rushing to speak, just watch. Notice who interrupts whom. Notice whose opinion subtly guides the group. Notice how one person's body language affects everyone else's tone. That's data, that's insight, and once you start seeing it, you can't unsee it. Observation is how smart people conserve energy. They don't waste words on proving themselves. They wait, they study, and then they act with precision. Because while everyone else is reacting to noise, they're decoding the signal hidden beneath it. So speak less, watch more, and let the silence sharpen you. Because those who observe deeply end up understanding what others completely miss, and in a world full of noise, understanding is the ultimate form of intelligence. There's a common misconception that intelligence means being purely logical, cold, calculated, detached. But the truth is, real intelligence isn't about removing emotion, it's about balancing it. The smartest people don't eliminate their feelings, they integrate them. They know that emotion and logic aren't enemies. They are two instruments in the same orchestra, and when they're played in harmony, the result is clarity. Think about it this way. Logic is the map, emotion is the compass. Logic tells you where to go, but emotion tells you why it matters. If you only use logic, you might make technically correct decisions that feel empty or disconnected. If you only use emotion, you'll chase passion without direction. Smart people learn to merge the two, to let logic steer, but emotion fuel the drive. The science behind this is fascinating. The emotional brain, specifically the limbic system, communicates directly with the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for planning and decision making. When those two systems are in sync, you think clearly and act with conviction. When they're in conflict, you either overthink or overreact. Balance isn't a mood, it's a neurological skill. You've probably seen this in leaders, the ones who can make hard choices without losing empathy. They can fire someone without cruelty, negotiate without arrogance, and stand firm without becoming rigid. That's not softness, that's mastery. Emotional intelligence isn't about being nice. It's about reading the emotional data that others ignore and then making rational decisions informed by that awareness. And here's what's interesting: emotional control doesn't mean suppression. It doesn't mean pretending you don't feel fear, anger, or frustration. It means understanding those emotions before they control you. It means being able to say, "I'm angry right now, but I don't need to become anger." That's the moment you take back the steering wheel. When you can recognize what you feel without being consumed by it, you're free to choose your response. You're no longer a passenger in your own nervous system. That's one of the most powerful forms of intelligence there is: self-regulation. Because anyone can make smart choices when they're calm, only the truly intelligent can do it when they're not. Look at how people behave under pressure. Stress reveals whether someone's intellect is balanced or brittle. The loudest person in the room might seem confident, but often that's insecurity wearing armor. The calm person, the one who keeps their voice steady while everyone else loses composure, that's emotional intelligence in action. That calm isn't the absence of emotion, it's the presence of control, and this balance extends beyond decision making. It's what makes relationships thrive. Smart people don't just understand ideas, they understand people. They know that emotions are data too. They notice the subtext in a conversation, the hesitation behind a yes, the pain behind defensiveness. They don't dismiss those signals as irrational. They interpret them as part of the larger equation. When logic and emotion work together, you make decisions that are not only effective, but sustainable. You avoid burnout, resentment, and regret. You build trust with others because you're grounded, consistent, and authentic. People can feel that. They can sense when your calm isn't fake composure but true balance. The irony is, this kind of intelligence often looks simple. It's the person who takes a moment to breathe before responding, the one who asks a question instead of launching an argument, the one who seems unshakable not because they don't feel, but because they've learned how to feel wisely. And that's the secret. Emotional balance isn't weakness or softness, it's strategy. It's how you think clearly in chaos, how you lead without breaking, how you stay human while still being sharp. So, don't kill your emotions to seem intelligent. Train them to serve your mind instead of sabotaging it. Because the smartest people aren't the ones who feel less, they're the ones who know exactly when to feel and when to think. One of the most overlooked traits of truly intelligent people is their relationship with boredom. Most people run from it. They grab their phone, open a new tab, scroll endlessly, anything to fill the quiet. But the smartest individuals understand that boredom isn't the enemy, it's a doorway. That space where nothing's happening on the surface is often where the most profound mental work is being done underneath. When you're bored, your mind starts to wander, and that wandering isn't random. Neurologically, that's when the brain's default mode network activates. It's the same network that handles introspection, creativity, and long-term planning. So when people say their best ideas come in the shower, on a walk, or right before sleep, it's not a coincidence. It's because the brain finally has space to breathe, to connect dots without interruption. The problem today is that we've trained ourselves to fear stillness. We've become stimulation addicts. Every spare moment is filled with noise, a video, a notification, a scroll, a ping. The moment silence enters, we panic. But smart people have learned to tolerate that discomfort. They've realized that deep focus doesn't come from doing more, it comes from doing less, but doing it intentionally. There's a kind of mental toughness in sitting quietly with your own thoughts. Because when you stop distracting yourself, your mind starts surfacing the things you've been avoiding, the insecurities, the decisions you haven't made, the work you've been postponing. Most people escape that by keeping busy. Smart people face it. They know that clarity often hides behind discomfort. If you look at the lives of high performers, thinkers, creators, innovators, you'll see they all have some form of structured solitude. It could be early mornings without devices, long walks without music, or a habit of journaling before bed. It's not about mysticism, it's neuroscience. That stillness allows the brain to consolidate information and generate original insight. In silence, you start to see the patterns that noise keeps hidden. Here's something to consider. Every time you pick up your phone in a moment of boredom, you're teaching your brain that it doesn't need to work to find stimulation. Over time, that dulls your focus. It weakens your ability to stay with difficult thoughts, to follow an idea through complexity. But when you resist that impulse, even for a few minutes, you strengthen the circuits responsible for patience, attention, and insight. This is why the smartest people often seem unusually calm. They're not constantly reaching for stimulation. They're comfortable in that gap between inputs. Their creativity doesn't come from chaos. It comes from depth. They can sustain focus on one problem for hours because they've trained their mind to stay, not to scatter. The paradox is that boredom is not the absence of thought, it's the incubation of it. When you give your brain stillness, it starts stitching together ideas that seemed unrelated. That's why some of the greatest innovations in history came during long, quiet periods, not during brainstorming marathons, but in the silence that followed. So what does this look like in real life? It means choosing to protect your focus the way you'd protect your time or money. It means giving yourself permission to do nothing, not as laziness but as mental training. It means sitting with the urge to check your phone and letting it pass. That small act of resistance rewires your attention. The truth is, the mind works best when it's not being chased. Insight can't be forced, it has to be allowed, and that permission comes from silence, not speed. Smart people know this. They build empty space into their lives on purpose because they understand that clarity doesn't arrive through noise, it arrives through stillness. So stop running from boredom. It's not the absence of meaning, it's the beginning of it. In that quiet space where the world goes still, your mind finally starts to speak. And if you learn to listen, it'll tell you everything you've been trying to find in the noise. The smartest people I've ever encountered all share one subtle but powerful trait. They're willing to be wrong. They're not afraid to outgrow their own ideas. They learn, unlearn, and relearn constantly. While most people spend their lives defending what they already know, the truly intelligent are busy updating their mental software. They treat knowledge like a living system, something that must evolve to stay relevant. It's easy to cling to certainty. Certainty feels safe. It gives us identity, stability, belonging, but it's also a trap. The moment you decide you already know enough, your mind stops expanding. You start filtering out information that contradicts your beliefs, and slowly, without realizing it, your intelligence becomes rigid. You're not learning anymore, you're maintaining a worldview. Smart people avoid that trap. They understand that growth requires surrender, surrendering pride, ego, and even the version of yourself that believed differently yesterday. From a psychological perspective, this ability to update your thinking is tied to cognitive flexibility. It's the mental agility that allows you to shift perspective, adapt to change, and integrate new evidence without collapsing. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. When you can say, I was wrong, what you're really saying is, I've grown. Think about how the world changes. Technology, culture, economics, even morality, everything evolves. Yet many people live using outdated mental maps. They try to navigate new terrain with old directions. Smart people, on the other hand, treat their beliefs like software. They delete what's corrupted, reinstall what works, and keep updating. That's why they stay relevant while others fade into frustration. But here's the catch: unlearning is uncomfortable. It feels like loss. You have to admit that something you once believed deeply is no longer true or useful. That's painful because our beliefs aren't just thoughts, they're part of our identity. Letting them go feels like erasing a piece of ourselves. But it's in that discomfort that transformation begins. The mind, like a muscle, only grows through resistance. This process also demands humility. The smartest people know they'll never have all the answers. They approach knowledge with curiosity, not arrogance. Instead of saying, I know, they ask, what am I missing? That question keeps their mind open. It's the same quality you see in great scientists and thinkers. They're skeptical of their own certainty. They understand that today's truth might be tomorrow's limitation, and this mindset applies far beyond academics. In relationships, in business, in personal development, the ability to update your understanding keeps you aligned with reality. You don't cling to old patterns that no longer serve you. You don't stay trapped in an outdated story about who you are. You evolve. That's not just intelligence, that's emotional maturity. When you combine that flexibility with discipline, it becomes unstoppable. You start to see learning not as something you do, but as something you are. Every mistake becomes feedback. Every change becomes data. Every contradiction becomes an invitation to expand your perspective. Instead of fearing confusion, you start to seek it out because you know that confusion is the first sign of growth. There's something profoundly liberating about realizing that you don't need to be consistent with your past self. You're allowed to evolve. You're allowed to think differently today than you did last year. That's not hypocrisy. That's intelligence adapting to new information. The goal isn't to stay the same, it's to stay awake, and maybe that's what separates the truly intelligent from the merely informed. Information can be memorized, but wisdom has to be updated. The smartest minds are like rivers, always moving, always reshaping, never stagnant. They know that the mind's greatest strength isn't its ability to remember, but its willingness to change. So keep learning, but more importantly, keep unlearning. Because the moment you stop editing your mind, the world starts passing you by. And intelligence, no matter how great, means nothing if it refuses to grow.